Yeah, I was one of those guys who didn't really like Superman because he's boring, lame, and not an interesting character. He's just some alien who can fly and he fights bad guys. That was my opinion until I read this. For All Seasons, the comic. Ever since I reviewed Superman for All Seasons in November of 2022, I think, I really switched up on the character. It really opened my eyes for what Superman can be when he has the right writers. For All Seasons was pretty much like my key for opening the door to liking Superman. And since then, more recently, I've become more interested in the character. Man of Steel, the rest of the DCEU, kinda, I never really finished it, the 40s cartoon, and way more. But within that pile of Superman media, there are two that seemed to shine much brighter than the rest. Stories that are so unbelievably good, there are two stories that I'm dedicating an entire project on. I am not here to make a huge retrospective on the character or to talk about all the Superman stuff I've checked out, good and bad. No. You've read the title. Today, I'm apologizing. For All Seasons is what I called the comic that made me like Superman. The stories I'll talk about today are so far beyond that. So let's not waste time and start with the first story. Superman Peace on Earth is a 64-page one-shot by Alex Ross, a well-known comic artist, and Paul Dini, who's probably best known for working on stuff like Superman and Batman the Animated Series. And it is seriously one of the best comics I have ever read in my entire life. Like, this is a comic that I can very comfortably put with my favorites like V for Vendetta or Kraven's Last Hunt, all of those. The story opens up with Clark as a young boy back in Smallville, specifically when he was with Pa Kent, learning wise and valuable lessons as Pa Kent usually does. The big lesson here being that the seeds spread out in the fields are pretty much just like people. Not all people will make it, but they all deserve a chance to grow. Cut to current day Metropolis, and it's the holidays. Superman is flying, bringing a massive Christmas tree down and lighting it up for everybody, which is also like this tradition that Superman does within the universe of the story. But before leaving, he hears the faintest cry for help. As he flies down and saves this woman, Superman notices how light she feels as the woman passes out in his arms. She was severely malnourished. Superman brings her to a downtown rescue mission, making sure the woman is fed and safe, but afterwards, Superman can't stop thinking about her. After learning about world hunger and its causes, Superman goes directly to US Congress, wanting to bring awareness to the fact that world hunger and stuff is more than just a Metropolis or a United States issue, and so he gives an idea to bring food all around the world. And that's exactly what he does. Country by country, Superman begins to bring food to those in poverty, bringing hope and joy into the lives of many like he planned. With every trip he makes, Superman feels more sure that he's making a difference. Until Superman brings food to a small European country. Surrounded by destroyed cities and the effects of war, a city that seems to have lost all hope, the people silently accept the food and silently walk away. Except for one little boy asking, "Will you be back tomorrow?" And all Superman can do is look away, realizing that his plan may not be as perfect as he thought. And even as he tries his best, Superman runs into more problems. People so desperate that they turn into unthinkable mobs, clinging onto Superman, clinging onto that small glimmer of hope, people rejecting his help, calling him a fraud, an activist, and even worse, mankind's greed and inability to share. Superman flies to another country, one specific country that he feels needs his help, but their government denies it, even sending a missile containing poison towards Superman and the resources he carries, ruining Superman's plan. What specifically hit hard in my opinion is when Superman realizes the little grain he had left was poisoned, unable to be saved, and he says, "They poisoned the grain. Charred and toxic it runs through my fingers. My mission ends here, incomplete and in failure." And this here, along with the ending of the story, is one of my favorite moments or scenes in all of comics, because there's no big villain that is here to stop him. There's no Lex Luthor or Bizarro or Metallo blasting his resources away. It was mankind, the one thing Superman was trying so desperately to save. Mankind's greatest enemy is itself, and it's heartbreaking to see Superman so down like this, knowing there's people all around the world that are still hoping for him to drop by and give them food, and that even though he is Superman, he isn't super enough to save everyone. And also, I think this is the best realistic Superman story we'll ever get. Ever. I know I trash on the DCEU films a lot, but just as a comparison, I much prefer this type of realistic Superman story where the Man of Steel is pushed beyond his limits, or in a world where humanity's reactions to what Superman does is more like how we, as real people, would react. Much more than a story like Man of Steel or Batman v Superman, where everyone's thought process in those movies felt either 100% pessimistic.
You can also see the squad of soldiers in the next room, preparing that tranquilizing agent of yours.
You won't need it.
You could be carrying some kind of alien pathogen.
Been here for 33 years, Doctor. Haven't infected anyone yet.
That you know of. We have legitimate security concerns.
Or thinking Superman was Jesus 2.0 to me. The way people look and revere to Superman as almost a godly figure in this story compared to Batman vs. Superman is way different in terms of context, and I just think it's done better in this comic. Also, because Batman vs. Superman took a lot of inspiration from this comic for a lot of things like cinematography, so I just think this was a fun comparison to make. Don't take this as like bashing the DCEU for no reason. The welfare of Earth and all its people will always be my primary concern. But if there is a solution to the problem of hunger, it must be one that comes from the compassionate heart of man and extends outward toward his fellow man. And so the story ends with, essentially, Superman asking everyone to share what they have. Whether it's resources, knowledge, just share with the people around you. And so Superman does that as well, teaching the children in Smallville what he was taught by the Kents. Patiently and gently, I share with others the way to scatter the seeds a few at a time, evenly between the rows so that each one will have enough space. I tell them not every seed will make it, but all of them deserve a chance to grow. Absolutely brilliant. Peace on Earth is one of the best comic books you can read. It's emotional, heartbreaking, gripping, but most of all, it is a realistic story. And though it has a super sad ending, it uses that sad part of reality and tells the reader what could possibly help the world, little by little, what could be used to have peace on Earth. One of the easiest 10 out of 10s I've ever given to a comic, and I didn't think any other Superman story could ever surpass it. That is, until I read the second and final story of this video. Over the course of 12 issues, this has become one of the greatest comics I've ever read, including manga. All-Star Superman is... calling it a masterpiece is an understatement. As a comic book, I think it nails everything it tries to achieve, even if there were some little arcs that I just wasn't as into compared to the others. When I think Superman, I now only think of All-Star until I remember that he has other stories. All-Star is not what I expected, not one bit, and yet it is probably, at least now for me, the single greatest and the definitive Superman comic. For All Seasons was the first Superman comic I both reviewed and read, and that was an origin story. All-Star Superman is a conclusion story, so I find this to be very fitting with the way I'm making these videos. This series is about a Superman who, due to solar radiation, is dying. Within its 12 issues, there's a lot going on, because Superman basically tries to achieve as many things as he can, and also doing things he was prophesied to do before his inevitable death, these 12 super challenges. Answering the impossible question, creating life itself, and though I don't think it was a super challenge, telling Lois his identity, and much more. And as much as I'm praising it, even after finishing it, I feel like there's so much I missed and so much stuff I'll appreciate more on a reread. Because when I first started it, I couldn't really get into it. Funny enough, that's what happened when I read For All Seasons as well. The art style was not something I had ever seen, and its first issue just didn't pull me in besides its general plot of Superman dying and the final page of the first issue. Specifically, the Quantum stuff never really got my attention until the finale, but besides this almost nitpicky complaint and me not really getting some parts, it is near perfect, a love letter to Superman. It's emotional, intense, funny, it really does everything. And one thing I loved specifically about this is how All-Star Superman feels super comic book-y. Like, it really leans into the more wacky and campy side of comics, like how they were, like, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago. For example, issue 7, Superman is confronted by a team of time-traveling supermen who fight this time disrupting monster. I don't know, it's definitely better than the Time Eater from Sonic though. There's a Mitch Piddleick kind of Superman, this weird looking guy, and yet with all these fun and silly concepts, it tells one of the most deeply emotional stories I've ever read in all of comics, and that balance in the narrative carries on the whole way. I mean, seriously, quite literally everything in this series is done well, even the stuff I just personally wasn't as into, like the whole Bizarro Underverse thing. Maybe it needs a reread, but yeah, that whole little arc didn't really wow me as much as the others, but there was still so much to like about it, like the character of Zibaro and his interactions with Superman. But I think what's done best in All-Star Superman is Superman himself. Like I said, All-Star is what I call the definitive Superman story, but I also think it has the Superman, the Clark Kent. Superman in this story is such an intelligent, kind person, and like Peace on Earth, All-Star really shows us that, though he's super, he isn't perfect. Superman has his own fears and feelings, and there are a lot of great and memorable moments where we see that. Knowing he doesn't have much time left, fearing how the world will be without him, fearing his own death, and yet with that burden and anxiety along with having to achieve these incredible 12 super challenges, he still goes out of his way to do the right thing. Bringing 6 kids on field trips to Egypt, bringing Lois Lane on a super-powered date, and even deviating from his plan. The best example of this is, I'm getting choked up just thinking about it, when Superman overhears a therapist telling his client to not jump, basically. The way he comes down, hugging and comforting the child and telling them how they're much stronger than they think, and that it's never as bad as it seems, it just screams hope. This is Superman, and the way he writes his adventures and his life down as these final will and testament thing is so cool. Superman does the right thing every single time in this story, even when he's treated poorly or pushed back, seemingly with no options. He believes you deserve that second chance, that redemption. I mean, the amount of times he says this to Lex Luthor of all people, who in this story was compared to literal dictators and other evil people. It's insane. But speaking on the characterization of Superman, he's not the only character who I thought was brilliantly written. Lex Luthor was phenomenal here. In this, he's smart, he's cocky, he has a massive ego, believing he's above others. It's just great. It really screams the perfect Lex Luthor compared to what I've heard about in other stories. Like when he flexes his muscles to Clark and says, "These are real, unlike Superman's," and then insults Clark's flabby physique. It's such a great rendition of the character, and we see how that superiority complex and his actions, his inability to do what's right, is what stabs him in the back later on. It is just, man, it is such a wonderful story. It is the Superman comic. And the ending left me just broken, man. Those final few pages are like absolute perfection. Giving Superman a conclusion is a very cool concept. And though it could have just been, oh, Doomsday is here, or like him dying in battle, All-Star gives a 12-issue breakdown of the character, deconstructing and letting us see everything we love about the Man of Steel. I know I kind of broke down Peace on Earth a lot in this video, like I went deep into the actual story, but All-Star, I kind of don't want to ruin it here for the people who haven't seen it. I'm trying to avoid big spoilers while still giving my analysis thingy on it. Quick spoiler though, so skip 20 seconds if you haven't read it. The statue that's made after Superman's death was a great homage to, I think, the Memorial issue, where he's got like the bird on his arm. I noticed that reference and I loved it. If you want to know my thoughts on pretty much each All-Star Superman issue though, spoilers and all, I have written mini reviews all over my Comic Geeks account though, so. Now, throughout this video, I've reviewed 2 phenomenal stories, and what do I have to say? I get it. For All Seasons made me understand that Superman can be done well with the correct writers, like I said at the start of this video. Peace on Earth and All-Star made me realize just how phenomenal of a character Superman truly is, how timeless and amazing the idea of Superman is. And though I'll never be able to have anyone other than Spider-Man as my favorite because I love Spider-Man, it's a personal thing, I can't deny that Superman really is the hero. He is one of, if not the greatest of his genre. He's the definitive superhero, cape, trunks and all, especially with stories like the ones I talked about today. I feel like I now can finally get Superman. The character has gone from the bottom of my list, a supposedly boring and uninteresting character because he's so overpowered and flat, one-dimensional, to one of the greatest fictional characters I've ever seen. And I can't wait to check out more Superman stuff like the red and blue trade paperback I bought, the 70s films with Christopher Reeves, and the one I'm probably the most excited for, James Gunn's Superman, which just got a suit reveal as of writing this video. And listen, the complaints, I like it, and oh, but the lines look stupid, it's MCU-ified. I think it might be a Kryptonian thing. I'm going off script, but I feel like the Lions, they're gonna make that as an excuse, like, oh, it's a Kryptonian-made suit, or not, whatever, I don't care, I think it looks fun. Also, I made a post over on my Comic Geeks account asking what everyone's favorite Superman story was, and I just wanted to thank everyone who commented. We got some great and familiar pitch like For All Seasons and Birthright and the Death of Superman's DC AMU film, which I really enjoyed, and others that I get to put on my read list like Up in the Sky, Birthright, Smashes the Klan, and a bunch of other cool stories. So if you can't tell, I love Superman now. It's impossible to deny just how great he is, a literal beacon of hope and positivity. And after years and years and years of trashing the entire character, not a specific adaptation, the whole mythos of Superman, for no reason really, I am saying sorry to Superman. If you enjoyed and want to see more, hit those awesome buttons below and check out my Instagram since that's where I'm most active when giving updates and stuff. As always, thank you for watching, and remember, you're much stronger than you think you are.
Dreams save us. Dreams lift us up and transform us into something better. And on my soul, I swear that until my dream of a world where dignity, honor, and justice are the reality we all share, I'll never stop fighting. Ever.
It ain't hard to tell, I excel, then prevail. The mic is contacted, I attract clientele. My mic check is life or death, breathing a sniper's breath. I exhale the yellow smoke, a Buddha through righteous steps. Deep like the shining, sparkle like a diamond. Sneaker Uzi on the Allen, and my army jacket lining hit the earth like a comet invasion. Nazis like the Afro situation, half man, half amazing. Cause in my physical I can express through song, delete stress like Motrin, then extend stress.